Hello language learners. A good sign that somebody is good at something and has a lot of experience in something is if they've made a lot of mistakes. Like, the more mistakes, the better. Considering I've been learning languages off and on for like 10 years, I've made a lot of mistakes. I've made a lot of really, really bad mistakes. In this video, I'm going to share with you 7 big, giant, huge, awful, horrible mistakes that I've made in my language learning so that you don't make those same mistakes, because they're time wasters, they're stressful, they're all sorts of bad things. If you have made any of these mistakes yourself, or you currently are right now, leave me in the comment section below. I would love to hear about it. We all make mistakes. It's fine. If we don't make mistakes, then we're not really learning anything, especially in language learning. The first mistake I used to make over and over again years ago, back when something called Live Mocha was a thing. Live Mocha, I think Rosetta Stone bought it out, because if you go to livemocha.com, it redirects to Rosetta Stone. But Live Mocha was basically a language learning website where you could, go through lessons that they had on Live Mocha, but the big thing was that you could interact with native speakers of the language. Obviously nowadays there are a ton of different options to do the same kind of thing, but Live Mocha was pretty cheap. And one of the deals that I took advantage of with Live Mocha a lot was that if you proofread the written English or whatever language of somebody who was trying to learn that language, you would get free access to everything. So I took advantage of that a lot. So Live Mocha was cool. However, the big thing that I did wrong with Live Mocha, and I did this a lot, was reviewing the same stuff over and over again. So I had started learning Spanish in high school, and so when you learn Spanish in high school, you learn estar, tener, and all the conjugations, simple vocabulary, how to express like my name is, where am I from, all that like A1, A0 level stuff. And because I knew that information and I was confident with it and I was comfortable with it, that's what I used to spend my time doing, which sounds dumb to say it out loud, but when you're afraid of failure, I think was a piece of it. When you're afraid of failure, it's really easy to feed off the energy of going through Spanish or whatever language you're learning and feeling confident in the material and being comfortable with it and getting everything right. It's a lot harder to throw yourself into a challenge and be wrong sometimes and make mistakes. And so I definitely fell into that trap a lot, making things too easy and depending on that feel-good energy. Not to say that feeling good with language learning is a bad thing, absolutely not. Language learning should be fun, and it should be not too much of a challenge that you hate yourself, but a little bit of a challenge. So lesson learned with that one is that there's a fine balance between being comfortable and being productive. If you're rehashing the same information over and over again, which is really easy for beginners, then you're wasting your time. And it might feel good, but that feel-good stuff isn't gonna last, because after it feels good, it gets boring. So that was the first end of the spectrum of the mistakes that I made. The other end of the spectrum, I did that one too. So the other end of that spectrum for me was going way too hard. I do this all the time in my life. It's a problem, and you may also experience this. I treated language learning like a sprint, not a marathon. I thought I could learn as much as I could in like 3 months, 5 months, whatever it is. If I really focused and I really bore down and I didn't do anything else but practice a language, then I could get advanced in the shortest period of time. I wasn't helped by a very popular blog called Fluent in 3 Months, where I took that idea and I went hard with it. Now, Fluent in 3 months, that concept is fine if you do nothing but the language for 3 months. But when I was doing this, I was living in Spain, I was experiencing a new country, a new culture, I was traveling a lot, I was teaching, I was working. So what happened? I burned out. The complete opposite of getting bored and wasting my time was I burned out. I couldn't do anything. I was so tired. I started getting depressed, sick, and nothing that I tried to learn would actually stay in my brain. My brain was like at full capacity. Lesson learned there is be mindful that it's a journey. Language learning is a journey. It's not to get to a certain destination, a certain level of fluency, a certain exam grade, what have you. Those are great goals, but if you don't enjoy the actual process of learning a language, then you're not doing it for the right reasons and you're not going to actually accomplish your goals. My third big mistake. Ooh, this was a bad mistake. So when you're immersing yourself in a foreign language, There are absolutely mistakes that you can make. When I was living in Spain, the first half of my trip there, I did it all wrong because I was living in Madrid, which is in an international city, lots and lots of native English speakers around, lots and lots of Americans around, and I went to Spain through an American company. So I started orientation and I was picked up at the airport and I was around a whole bunch of Americans before I was thrown into Spain. Well, it's easy enough once you've already made those relationships with other Americans to not go out and be in spaces where the native Spanish speakers are. After like 4 months living in Spain, my Spanish was still nowhere. It had been so easy for me to avoid the Spanish because it was scary. Immersion is absolutely scary. And I spent so much time not being around that nothing actually happened with my language. So, lesson learned there is even if you're immersed, even if you go travel abroad to a different country, you have to be careful about how you're spending your time. You have to make sure that you're still around people who speak a different language than you. Even if you make friends with an American and you swear that you're gonna be speaking a language, watch yourself because I can almost guarantee it's not gonna happen. It's too easy to fall back to your native language. And even if you can't go abroad, it still holds true back at home. There are so many ways, thanks to the internet and thanks to apps and technology and stuff like that, there are so many ways for you to fake immersion. It's all about being around the language. So seeking out that language on the internet, in books, in newspapers, all sorts of things. No matter what your case is, no matter what your scenario is, no matter how your level is, making the active choice to be around the language as much as you can is like, it's huge. It's honestly huge. And it'll make a really big difference with your language learning. My next mistake was judging and criticizing myself for not being perfect in my language routine, my language strategy. I am very hard on myself, and it's easy to be hard on yourself, especially when you don't really know what to expect. I would set myself a language learning routine. I would say, 3 times a week, for example, I'm gonna go on base slang and I'm going to speak. I'm gonna practice speaking for an hour. Well, first of all, that was a lot for me. I am an introvert. I do not enjoy speaking to anybody for that long, much less in a different language, which requires a lot more work. But when I failed that strategy, when I set myself a strategy and a routine and a schedule and I failed it, I took the wrong approach. Instead of being accepting and looking into that and thinking why that didn't work and what I could do to change my schedule and shift my mindset to something that would actually be helpful and productive, I was so judgmental towards myself. I was so critical of myself and I thought, what is wrong with me? Why can't I do what I set out to do? If I could just do this, then I could learn the language, which is not a helpful thing to think. We tend to be our own worst critic. Make sure you're just being nice to yourself. Learning a language is hard and nothing about it is perfect. There are so many people out there who will glamorize learning a language and talk about how amazing and easy it is. It's amazing, but it's not easy. And a lot of times it's hard. It can get really, really, really hard, especially the more you learn. If you set yourself a routine or strategy and for some reason or another it doesn't work, or if it has been working for a while and then it stops working for you, that's okay. Real human, go easy on yourself. Think about why that didn't work. If it's just something that happened in your life and you have to step back from hobbies and friends and that kind of stuff, if you have to step back for a little bit temporarily, that's totally cool. Step back. Or if it's something that you're trying over and over and over again, it's time to think about why what you're trying to do isn't working. It's not your fault. Don't blame yourself. That's not gonna help you. Think about your life, think about your routine, even talk to somebody else about it. Figure out what's going wrong. Are you overwhelming yourself? Is it not actually fun for you? Are you not learning what you want to be learning? Are you not achieving your goals? There could be so many different explanations as to why your strategy isn't working for you. This is a good opportunity to do some introspection and think about what needs to change. Next one. Oh, actually I have to get something to show you what I'm talking about. Hold on. This bad boy. When I was in Spain, I bought 2 notebooks to work on my Spanish with. This is one of them. And if you think this is full, you would be wildly mistaken because, of course, like everybody else in the world with notebooks, it's really fun and motivating to buy a new notebook, but like, look at I Okay, this is like half full, that's fair. So what I would do is I would go through my textbooks that I had, because I was taking Spanish classes while in Spain with a Spanish school. I would go through my textbooks that I was using and I would pick out all the vocabulary and I would write it down and flip through it, and I would just do this all the time. So I have pages and pages. These are back to front too. Pages and pages and pages and pages and pages. Pages. Okay, I'm gonna go through like half the notebook if I keep doing that. But I had pages and just like a stupid number of vocab words that I had written down, which is fine, that's not the problem. The problem was the way that I was trying to learn them. I was working in a public school at the time. I would come into the school early in the morning, I would sit down with my notebook and I would go through all of these words one by one and try to remember them. But there's a couple of reasons why this doesn't work. First of all, when you go through words like one by one and just like see the Spanish and come up with the English, see the Spanish, come up with the English, see the Spanish, come up with the English, and then you see that word in context, there's a good chance you're not gonna remember it, because I didn't. I mean, this is why you learn vocabulary and grammar in context, because when your brain is not used to seeing the word in context, when it sees the word in context, it sees it as like a completely new word. So I spent all this time memorizing hundreds and hundreds of words for nothing, because when I saw them later, they didn't bring any meaning to my head. I had just learned them as a translation of an English word. I hadn't put meaning to them like you do when you learn them in context. And second of all, okay, so I don't know if you can see this, but the words on this notebook, flying chairs. Why was I learning flying chairs? Like I straight up picked up vocabulary from the textbook, not discerning whether or not that word would be important to me in my life and whether or not it might be a waste of time to learn it, but I just wrote it down because that's what you're supposed to do with vocab, and I would just memorize. So flying chairs, drop tower, nougat. I say that so infrequently that I don't even know how to pronounce it in English. Nougat? Nugget? Nougat, I think. I don't even pronounce it in English. There's no reason for me to know that word in Spanish. But I mean, that's another side note of like a wrong thing that I did with vocabulary, with how I learned vocabulary, was that flying chairs? Why was I wasting my time with that? Lesson learned there, because I don't know any of these words anymore. These did not go into my long-term memory. These might have been in my short-term memory 5 years ago. They're not in my long-term memory now. So that's a good sign as any that this whole thing was a failure. Lesson learned, do not memorize vocabulary words one by one, especially ones that don't make any sense to your life, but that's besides the point. Do not memorize words one by one. Learn them in context. Learn them with some sort of SRS, like Linguist or like Anki or something like that. Do not just sit here and go through these one by one, because you will not learn them. You will not learn the meaning behind them. You will just learn them as something to be translated, and that is not how we learn vocabulary. Speaking of this notebook, there is also one other very bad thing that I use this notebook for. Let me find it. Conjugation charts. I would do this for hours. I remember waking up in the morning feeling very motivated to work on my Spanish, so what I do is sat in bed and I just did my conjugation chart. These are for preterite and imperfect, I'm sure. Preterite, I don't know what I did here. Like this whole page is preterite, this is half preterite and half imperfect. And keep in mind that I wasn't, learning examples of when to use it. It just says imperfecto con frecuencia, which is fair, but doesn't mean anything. Preterito, una vez. No, I said preterite, not preterito. Whoops. But anyway, so I just sat here and did these conjugations over and over again, which is great if you're testing. Same thing if you're learning the vocabulary one by one. It's great for if you're taking a test that doesn't require any actual understanding of the language, but you're supposed to be, taking an exam and showing that you can translate. If you're planning on actually using this stuff, no conjugation tables. Do not do this, ever. This is for taking exams and not for actual use of the language. because I can tell you right now, this did nothing for me. All these pages of conjugation tables, I did the same thing over and over again. I didn't even conjugate a word. I just did AR, aste, o, amos, astes, aron. I didn't even conjugate a word. I just did the suffixes. Don't do that. That is a waste of your time. Instead, learn to conjugate in context. Again, there are a lot of different resources that you can use to test yourself online. I would also recommend going on something like Lingo Hackers or LangCorrect, or literally just writing something down, using in the past tense, and then just have somebody correct it. It can be much, much more effective for you. And the last mistake that I want to mention in this video was comparing myself to others. This is so easy to do, especially in the online space. Again, I've said it before, I'm gonna say it again, there are so many YouTubers and bloggers who will talk about how they learned a language quickly and how they became fluent in a language in some random amount of time, like fluent in 3 months. Do not compare yourself to them. For one, you probably can't be sure exactly what their levels of fluency and what skills. Remember, fluency doesn't have a specific definition to it. It's kind of like a feeling more often than not. But you don't know where their skill level is. And also, the internet is full of people who lie. Just straight up, 100%. But specifically, I do remember this one example where I was in a Spanish class and I was like trying to find the level I was at, because the test that the Spanish school gave me told me I was A1. I was definitely not A1. So I was in a B2 class and I was not B2 yet, but there was this one girl there who was just like speaking and just like flowed out of her. And I compared myself to her so much and I thought I was so dumb. There's no way I belonged there because I couldn't speak as well as she could. Somebody else who you think is better than you. Worrying about that isn't going to help your language learning. Worrying about somebody else's skills is not going to help you. So those are the 7 mistakes that I had, planned out for this video. In the comment section below, let me know if you've also done something similar, and if you did, what you did to overcome that mistake, or if there's anything else that you've done that has really held your language learning back. Also let me know in the comment section below. These mistakes are so much more common than we like to think, just because it's really not sexy to talk about these kinds of things on the internet. But that's all I have for this video. Remember, you can find me every other Monday on my blog at crashculture.com, right here on YouTube every Wednesday and Sunday, and in my Facebook group at crashculture.com/community. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.